If we're trying to collaborate productively to get things done with other people, what can really damage things is defensiveness. So let's take a look at it. Legendary family therapist Virginia Satir laid out some defensive stances that she saw in how people relate. I'm Rich from Let's Go, and using her work as a foundation, we can find ourselves with 5 defensive stances that damage collaboration. 5 stances that we notice in other people and in ourselves. The first is blaming. And when we're in that blaming stance, our energy is focused on deciding who's at fault and making it loud and clear that it's definitely not us. Blaming is quick to point fingers and make excuses, and we blame at the cost of doing something that will move things forwards. Blaming turns collaboration into a battle. The second stance is placating. And in placating, we're orientated around what we imagine the other person wants to hear. So we might just say yes when we really mean no, or misrepresent our ideas or feelings in case they disturb things. Now, placating looks nice on the surface, but underneath it damages trust. The third defensive stance is avoiding. Refusing to engage in a thing that might be inconvenient or uncomfortable. And avoiding can be obviously not turning up or ignoring things, but also just delaying, sidestepping, obscuring. And whatever the tactic, the result is that things are unresolved and incomplete. The fourth defensive stance is dogmatic. Reality is complex and there are different agendas, feelings, ways of looking at things. But when we're dogmatic, we retreat into a fiction where we know the correct answer to every question. A dogmatic stance shuts down curiosity and writes off new ideas. The fifth defensive stance is posturing. And this is where our whole orientation is towards making sure that we look good, where our reputation is this fragile thing that we must protect rather than a natural result of good work. Posturing tries to insulate us against vulnerability, but in doing so it blocks empathy, creativity, connection. And there we have 5 defensive stances, different ways that we defend ourselves: blaming, placating, avoiding, dogmatic, posturing. If we're under attack and in real danger, a defensive stance might make sense, but it always comes at a cost. And these are unhelpful ways of engaging in collaboration. We can notice these stances in others, but a more powerful question is to look in ourselves and honestly ask, which stance do I sometimes take when I'm under pressure? And does it really help me get what I want? The goal here isn't to blame ourselves for blaming or placate ourselves that defensiveness is justified. The goal is to see that it's possible to take a stance that isn't defensive. A stance that is open and curious, that knows that we don't see everything, but is willing to say what we do see. Virginia Satir called this leveling. Can we level with each other? Because this is what makes collaborative relationships really work, when someone levels with us and we know where we stand. Martha Beck said, "Nothing sounds as good to the soul as the truth." And leveling has this refreshing, grounded quality. Leveling is what makes collaborative relationships strong. It's how we build trust. Look, we all get defensive, but the first step is to notice. Because often the flip to leveling is a relatively subtle shift in our stance that makes a transformational difference in what we can achieve. It leaves us much more powerful and productive. And who doesn't want that? There are nuances here, and there's much more to say about how we deal with defensiveness in ourselves, in others, in our culture. But one thing surely is very clear. Collaboration can't thrive when people are defensive.